Module 14, Digital Text Corpora, Part 1. So, in this module, we'll discuss in brief some of the most notable digital corpora which are developed in the second half of the last century. It is not possible to give the full details about the compositions, the content of those major digital corpora so far developed. So we like to emphasize on some of the major or most referred to corpora developed and what are the strategies, methods they have applied. So on this part, we would like to emphasize or refer to or discuss the brown corpus, the lob corpus, then Australian corpus of English, the corpus of New Zealand English, the Freiburg lob corpus here. So these five major corpora are discussed here. So as we know that the introduction of digital corpus dates back to 1960s. This should be treated as a milestone in the history of corpus generation. In 1961, two linguists from the Brown University, namely Nelson Francis and Henry Corpora, first initiated an attempt to develop a text corpus of 1 million words from English texts written and used in America. This corpus is globally accepted as the first language corpus generated in digital form. Following this attempt, across the globe, people of other countries also initiated almost similar attempts to develop corpora of different types, different nature, different form, and sometimes at the individual level, sometimes the collective level, or sometimes with full patronage of the government. So since it is not possible to develop or discuss in details of all those things, I would be very brief to refer to that. So first, the brown corpus. It is the brown corpus of the standard sample of present-day American English, which was developed in the year 1961 at Brown University, USA, by Francis and Corpora. The funding for this came from some other government agencies. The corpus consists of 1,014,312 words of running texts of edited English prose printed in the United States during the calendar year 1961. It contains written text samples composed by native speakers of American English. Although all the text materials included in this corpus first appeared in Britain from in 1961, some of the texts were undoubtedly written much earlier. No text known to be a second edition or reprint of the earlier text is included in this corpus. The composition of brown corpus is something like that. The brown corpus is made of 500 text samples. Each sample has around, say, 2,000 words. That constitute nearly more than 1 million words. Each sample starts at the beginning of a sentence, but not necessarily at a paragraph or some other largest division, and ends at the first sentence ending after 2000 words. The samples represent a wide range of styles and varieties of prose. But texts from verse are not included in it, on the ground that texts belonging to poetic composition present special linguistic problems different from those available in the prose texts. But the short verse passages quoted in prose samples are kept into the corpus because their deletion from the text will otherwise distort the cohesion of the text. Similarly, texts from dramas and plays are excluded since these texts are considered to be imaginative reactions to spoken discourse rather than being true to the representative of the written discourse of the language. Although the text samples from fictions are included in the corpus, texts that contain more than 50% of dialogues are excluded due to the above reasons. The samples are mainly selected due to their representative feature rather than for any subjectively determined excellence. So the composition was something like that. If you look at the diagram given here, there are nearly 500 texts, each one having 200 words. I can give the list here. That first part constituted the imaginative prose text contained press reporters, political, sports, society, sport news, financial and cultural, etc. That constituted 44 texts. 27 texts were taken from press editorial, including institutional, personal letters to editor, etc. 17 texts were taken from press reviews. 17 texts taken from skills and hobbies, mostly from books and periodicals. 36 texts are taken from 17 texts are from religions and books, periodicals and tracts. 36 were taken from skills and hobbies. 48 texts are taken from popular laws. 75 texts are taken from letters, biography, memoirs and periodicals. 30 texts were taken from miscellaneous categories like government documents, foundation reports, industry reports, college catalogue, industry, house organizations, and others. And 80 texts were taken learned and scientific writings from natural sciences, medicine, mathematics, social and behavioral sciences, political science, law, education, humanities, technology, engineering, etc. The imaginative prose text part had 29 texts from general fictions, 24 texts from mystery and detective fictions, 6 from science fictions, 29 texts from adventure and western fictions, 29 texts from romance and love stories, 9 from humor. Thus, the total 500 texts, each text having a range of 2000 words compiled. So that this particular corpus has been used over the years in several works of linguistics across the world. Starting from computation and analysis, this corpus has been used widely and heavily in the study patterns of pronunciation, punctuation, lexical collocation, part of speech tagging, digital access, dictionary compilation, use of personal pronouns, vocabulary frequency, distribution of grammatical tags, distribution of vocabulary items, and many more. So the Brown corpus, which was first developed in digital form, had created such a lasting impact on the entire linguistic community across the world that this has been, even today, one of the best used resources in any area of linguistic research. The second one is the lob corpus. Lob corpus actually Lancaster Oslo bargain corpus. This is a mutual collaborative work between University of Lancaster, University of Oslo, and the Norwegian Center for Humanities Bergen. So this was made as a reply to the Brown corpus. It also contains 1 million word collection of present day samples of British English, not that of American English. So it wanted to be exactly a good replica of the Brown corpus. Similar to the Brown corpus, it contains 500 text samples of nearly 2000 words each, distributed over 15 text categories, as also noted in cases of Brown corpus. Since the Brown corpus contains text printed and published in the 1961, the lob corpus also willfully contains text printed and published in the same year, so that various comparative studies between the two varieties become possible and easy. So the generation of text corpus of any type should not be treated in isolation from its intended usages, since there are several vital factors that virtually dictate the terms of selections of text samples: amount of texts, annotation, and subsequent processing of the texts. The aim of the project that results the formation of the lob corpus is fixed for assembling texts of the British English which can be at par or exact equivalent to American English. In fact, the generation of lob corpus has made interlingual research and applications far more a physical reality or feasible reality, which is hardly be possible before the creation of both the corpora. The reality is, both the corpora, rather than concentrating on limited text used in specific works, aims at for general representations of text types for future research on a broad range of aspects on respective languages. Besides, it facilitates the use of text of two countries across domains to match how British English texts are closely related or different from that of the texts of the American English. So the 15 domains that are included in the lob corpus and the texts, we can find out how it is that 44 texts come from press reporters, 27 texts from press editorial, 17 texts from press reviews, 17 texts from religion, 38 texts from skills, trade and hobbies, 44 texts from folklore, popular lore, 77 texts from biography, essays and letters, 30 texts from miscellaneous writings, 80 texts from learned and scientific writings, 20 texts from general fictions, 24 texts from mystery and detective fictions, 6 texts from science fiction, 29 texts from adventure and western fiction, 29 texts from romance and love story, 9 texts from humor. So similar to the Brown corpus, lob corpus is also being used across the world for various linguistic researches. So these are the two most frequently used corpora in the present age, where they are used in all possible ways for linguistic research. After that, we come across many other important corpora that are also developed following the same method, same strategies, or same kind of resources. If we look at the data which is available, the corpora which are now available, we can now refer to some other corpora which are also developed following the frame of lob and Brown corpus, and how they become very much important in understanding the different varieties of English across the world. The Australian corpus of English, which is known as S. The generation of Australian corpus of English initially begins in the Department of English, Macquarie University, New South Wales, Australia, in the year 1986. The project was supported by the Australian Research Grants Council for a few years. Later on, it was augmented with some new grants availed from Macquarie University. The S is the first systematically compiled homogeneous corpus in Australian English, which is designed to support varieties of linguistic research in Australia. As the corpus designers cherish a clear intention to identify the traits of differences between Australian English, British English, and American English, the S is modeled after the Brown corpus and the Loeb corpus to provide us information for comparative studies. The corpus is also meant to serve as a strategic sample of current Australian English and as a reference corpus for any kind of comparison with more specialized and homogeneous corpora prepared from Australian English. The S is made to match with the Brown corpus and the Loeb corpus in most aspects of its structure and constituency, so that direct interlingual comparisons are possible to make a wide range of genres of printed texts. The enterprise for designing an updated corpus of Australian English, however, also prompts the designers to not to match the text of XC fully with that of the Brown or the Loeb corpus chronologically. That means the Australian corpus designers declines to include data drawn from text published in 1960s. Instead of that, they take the materials published in and after 1986. So almost you can find out that there is a deviation of the years, the date which has been followed in cases of Brown corpus, in cases of Loeb corpus, and that of Australian corpus of English, S. While Loeb and Brown wanted to be exactly a replica to each other, so they had well-defined time and genres and area domains where from the text to be collected. In cases of Australian corpus, they more or less followed the domains where from the data should be collected. But the date was changed. They collected data after 1986, published in and after 1986. What happens actually is that due to variation in time scale, differences are obvious not only in the region but also in the time among Brown, Loeb, and Ash. However, this is of a considerable interest for the researchers for showing the directions of influence in the latter part of the century. So the difference of nearly 20 years can show that what kind of changes Australian English has undergone. One of the prime objectives of the S is to find out the balance of genres represented in the Brown and the Loeb corpus, as well as to create a more or less equivalent set of 20,000 word samples for each of the categories. This provides some quantitative targets for each of the 15 categories of the Brown and the Loeb corpus, and the numbers of text samples in the S categories are matched with them. However, there was deviation. The fiction category in the S is slightly different in consistency, but the total number of fiction samples remains the same. Within each text category, The sampling procedures are usually strategic rather than being random, because the corpus needs to match the subgenres and subject areas wherever possible. The some categories, say for fiction, the corpus requirements was such that designers have to sample almost every Australian monograph published in that year, and thus the representation in the S is almost total. Where there is a choice, as in the case of selection of monographs in non-fiction categories, they give preference to those which are held in multiple libraries in several states and therefore probably have more readerships and impacts. In cases of among serials, both the popular and scholarly selections is essential, usually dictated by the subject matters, to ensure a spread of interests and disciplines like broad ranges which are captured in the predecessors. So if you look at the diagram or the table given you below, there are slightly difference from Australian text to the included in the S corpus than the British corpus or American lab corpus, Brown corpus and lab corpus. But basic thing is that Australian corpus also wanted to be at par with them. So Australian corpus of English is considered as one of the earlier resources developed in Australian English for studying the nature, content, form and function and actual character of Australian English. Similar attempt was almost made in cases of New Zealand English. The Wellington corpus of New Zealand English was developed in the Department of English at the Victoria University of Wellington during 1986 and 1992, so within 6 years' time. The idea of a corpus of New Zealand English has been around since the first half of the 80s. It was proposed and supported by Linguistic Society of New Zealand Conference in Wellington in 1985. In 1986, planning for such a project was started in Department of Linguistics and English Language Institute by a group of scholars interested for developing the corpus of New Zealand English. In 1987, a tentative start was made by way of collecting some materials for the press section. It was also decided at the time that a small team will be constituted to collect the data and text materials for the formation of the corpus of New Zealand English. The goal is to develop two separate 1 million word corpora, one for written texts samples and other for spoken text samples for New Zealand English. The basic aim of this Wellington corpus of written New Zealand English is to provide a computerized samples of English written forms of New Zealand English, which will allow us to make direct comparison with the Brown corpus, the Love corpus, and especially with the S Australian corpus of English. Since S is not made when the New Zealand corpus is developed, the New Zealand corpus is based on the model of the Brown and the Love corpus in terms of content and coding, along with significant differences. So we find that New Zealand corpus is another resource which have systematically followed the model of the Brown corpus and the Love corpus to content develop the resource, although they differed in time frame. So there are many other issues also involved into it, how they constitute it. But since it is not possible to describe those things in details, I would request you to refer to the text materials in support of this. Now I would concentrate on the Freiburg Love corpus, or known as Flob corpus. The primary lob corpus of British English is a result of an effort when, in 1991, Christian Meyer takes an initiative to constitute a corpus, to compile a corpus that will match with the Brown and Lob corpus. The notable difference marked out in Flob corpus is that, with respect to the two renowned widely used corpus of the Lob corpus, that representing the language of early 60s, while Flob intended to represent of 1990s. When the project actually started in 1991 by German Foundation, it was clearly stated that this corpus will have the same designing principle, same designing method, but it will contain the texts which are published in 1991. That means there will be exactly a gap of 30 years between the first corpus, that is the Brown corpus or Lob corpus, and the Flob corpus, so that it becomes easier for us to investigate how, within the span of 30 years, language has gone through any kind of change. So, this is an important part or role of Flob corpus to show if English has gone through any kind of change at various levels, maybe at the word level, at a sentence level, grammar level, morpheme level, at all. So, it is possible to show if we have large amount of data representing two different time frames. So, the basic arguments behind the formation of Lob corpus was something like that. This will give us great opportunity to verify the current hypothesis of linguistic change in the present English. Second, through systematic comparison of frequency of use of lexical items, particularly the closed class items, it will give us a direct scope to detect the changes, if any, not previously noted. So, it will also provide scopes for systematically analyzing the major methodical issues that are ongoing in language change, particularly the interdependence of synchronic, regional varieties, and the stylistic variations on the genuine use of language in time. Finally, it supplies a database of the present-day British and American English to draw comparisons with other types of English used in India, Australia, New Zealand, in other parts. So, the sampling procedure of the Flob corpus was more or less same that was followed for Brown and the Lob corpus. The sampling principle used to compare newspaper text for the Brown and Lob corpus is random in nature. This section of the Brown and Lob corpus is therefore not truly representative of the strict statistical sense. This also applied for the Flob corpus also, since it decides to match the 1991 text materials as closely as possible with the samples used in the Lob corpus by sampling from the same newspapers. So, it was a very interesting note how after 30 years of gap, people were so meticulous in collections of data from the same sources and from the same disciplines, from same domains, so that comparison across the ages is possible. So, Flob corpus is really an interesting contribution to the field of study of language to understand how language undergoes change in use across this growth or change in time. So, these are the 5 major corpora so far developed as prominent resources in the second half of the last century. So, this is not a full-fledged picture of many thousand other enterprises that are being made at that time to produce corpora. This only gives a small ventilation, small window opens to opening a scope to realize that there are ways where we can actually look into the devices or techniques or strategies or methods to compile corpora of different types to make comparison across the languages possible. So, in the next module of this part, we'll show how corpora are also made in some other languages and how they also constitute or complement to the whole enterprise of corpus building across the globe. Thank you.